there will be anything in common between the sort of things I'm totally preoccupied with on a daily basis, and in one sense looking forward into the future, and very much in the roles that I've had through the Blue and now the Mental Health Commission, a range of other national initiatives, talking about the situation in which we find ourselves and a wider dialogue with the community about that particular issue. What are the particular things that we need to understand and explain better, or have more agreed common concepts about if we're going to achieve real change. And in that dialogue with people from the centre, I think there are some really important issues, and I look forward to the centre making a very significant contribution in the public discourse. To have the opportunity to talk in this particular setting is great, but I'm ashamed to stick to the things that I know something about, which are profoundly contemporary to some degree. And one of those is particularly about talking about suicide, and talking about suicide in the current public discourse, which is a continuing one. It's been a long one, but it's a particularly heated one and difficult one because of the wide variety of concepts that we currently have running in our society, which reflect a lot of different rich historical, philosophical and medical traditions in that particular area. But in terms of getting sensible public policy outcomes and advances in the area, actually a more sophisticated public discourse is actually essential. And a lot of the dialogue we have with the wider community, with policymakers, with the media, gets lost up a series of blind alleys, which at times seem to lack profoundly a historical, a cultural, or a health or medical perspective. And I think these kind of events and these kinds of interactions, and hopefully this style of research and activity in which the centre is involved, will make a significant contribution to that. In our own particular centre, this slow moving sort of thing. It's always interesting that technology doesn't move quite as quick as your own sort of pace of speaking, so I'll try and slow down and match the slides. In our own particular centre at the Brain and Mind Research Institute, we are somewhat preoccupied with what goes on in people's heads, and in a medical perspective, the extent to which new technologies and new understandings might contribute to the way that we understand what goes on through our own emotional life and our own physiology. But a large part of that is an active dialogue with the wider community. It isn't hopefully self-preoccupied. It is about trying to change a number of these key issues. And when you're out in the wider world talking about mental health, and people say sort of, what is it? If you quickly move to the issue of suicide and death, which I'm going to pick up Duncan's comments, it's profound. People get it immediately. So you get beyond the trivial and you get beyond the kind of broad philosophical kind of disagreements to say suicide. That is a problem. And when it happens in communities, in families, in particular situations where people face the reality of losing someone very close to them or someone who's in that predicament, people immediately respond, want something done. But what is it that should be done, or what are the wider sets of issues at stake, isn't so clear cut. Now, within the tradition that I come from, the medical and historical tradition that I come from, there are certain orthodoxies in this particular area about the way that we see the issue. And mostly, we see it and have seen it in broadly social terms. And certainly in Australia, we've had a national suicide prevention initiative, first a youth suicide initiative, youth prevention suicide initiative, and more recently, whole of life suicide prevention initiative, which is distinctly broad and not narrow. It's not about what goes on in people's heads. It's about what we already know might contribute to reduction in the suicide rate in general. And that's a very interesting thing because in some ways that broad discussion, which has a long tradition in our particular area and looks at key factors around social cohesion, social disapproval, changing means, etc., doesn't talk much actually about the individual. It doesn't talk much about what's going on in people's heads or the tradition of understanding what's going on in people's heads. And that's kind of interesting because a lot of the people we want to talk to, young people, men in trouble, etc., they don't necessarily tap into that wider social discourse either that's gone on. It's sort of one or two steps removed actually from their experience of what is actually happening to them, even if they are affected by it. So there's often quite a disconnect. In fact, for the last 20 years in Australia, we've had two distinctly different sets of government-endorsed responses. One are the suicide prevention initiatives. Quite separately, I've really spent my whole life, from the government point of view, in the mental health reforms initiatives, where actually we're not allowed to discuss suicide prevention. We're actually mental health service providers. Suicide prevention is that which is done at a public health level to large groups of people out of a certain set of historical facts and ideas that we understand well.